Everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be covering intelligent document processing, specifically around gaining efficiencies and insights through automation, both to increase productivity and unlock your data. So our speakers for today, my name is Jennifer Poma. I'm on our marketing team, and I will be moderating. And then we have Chris Lara. He is our Senior Director of Intelligent Automation, and Chris sits in our Knoxville office. And then Dustin Kleckler, he is Senior Consultant on our Intelligent Automation team, and he is in Nashville, Tennessee. And then Justin McCucci is a Senior Consultant on our Intelligent Automation team, and Jessa is in Richmond. And then real quick agenda for today, Chris is going to give a quick intro into UDIG, and then we're going to dive into intelligent automation and then specifically intelligent document processing. And then Jessa is going to run through 2 demos. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A. So please feel free to submit any questions through the Q&A tab in Zoom. And then real quick, we will also be sharing the recording of this webinar. And then tomorrow, and then we will also have a quick survey at the end. So please feel free to give us any feedback. And then I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Chris to give us a quick intro into UDIG.
Thanks, Jennifer, and good morning to those of you that are live. If you're listening to the recording, good afternoon, good evening. Appreciate your time today away from your other Zoom calls or other WebEx calls or Teams calls or whatever video conferencing tools that you all use. So definitely appreciate your time today, and we'll jump right in. So to give you a little bit of background on UDIG, so we're a 20-year-old company, actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. So we've got about 100 employees, a little more, a little less, depending on the projects and so forth, around the country. We are headquartered in Richmond, where Jennifer and Jessa are located. We do have offices in Northern Virginia, Nashville. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm in Knoxville. So we really cover the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast kind of areas, focused mainly on the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 type of accounts, state and local government, but really kind of focused in that Southeast Mid-Atlantic area. So we're really broken up into 4 pillars. Really, the strategy piece really overarches everything. So whether it's strategy in developing software products that you develop internally, data projects, what do you do with the data, and where we play in the transformation space. So our software engineering team, full end-to-end, development from the user interface and user experience all the way through, the back-end, data piece, database, visualization, those pieces. And as I said, we fall into the transformation area. So modernization, application modernization, digital transformation. That's where our intelligent automation practice falls, is under that pillar. So we'll talk a little bit about intelligent automation, and I'm going to turn over to Dustin here in just a minute. But before we get there, we'll talk about a couple of the platforms that you'll see referenced today in the presentation. One of them being UiPath. So that is an intelligent automation platform. So Dustin will go through some of these terms, really just kind of listed out the individual components. More than just for RPA, and Dustin will talk about RPA in a few minutes, but it's really a whole platform, and that's key. Includes some of the document processing pieces that you'll see today. And then we've also got Abby. You'll see some references to Abby when we get to some of the customer implementations. And Abby is really specializing in that document capture, document processing, OCR, but integrates very well with tools like UiPath. So we'll talk a little bit more as we go through, but just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a baseline of those 2 products. And you'll see them kind of fit in here as we go through the presentation. So with that, let me turn it over to Dustin.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I would like to start by really sharing a working definition of intelligent automation. So I'm sure many of us have heard buzzwords like machine learning or RPA. And so really kind of curious where intelligent automation fits in with that. So my working definition of intelligent automation is really a holistic solution that leverages various tools and technologies to automate a business process. So looking at a few of the solutions that can be a part of intelligent automation. RPA. So I know, there's been a lot of talk of RPA, and really that's good for those kind of mundane, repetitive tasks with simple rule-based logic. I've heard this kind of described as, macros on steroids. So process mining, discovering exactly what processes an organization is spending their time on and how these processes are being done. And then document intelligence. We'll look at that a bit later with some demos. But really, there's a whole host of tools that could be a part of an intelligent automation stack. So this approach of leveraging multiple tools in parallel really opens the door to a lot of business value. So intelligent automation can provide significant business value. And as these tools become more robust, we're seeing a lot of different ways that organizations are benefiting from intelligent automation. So things like increasing productivity or improving accuracy, improving data quality. So there's a lot of data in a given process that we really don't dive into or look into kind of during our day-to-day work, whether that's for just time or whatever reasons. But intelligent automation, some of these tools are really good at discovering that data and putting that data in a position to be leveraged. Another potential solution for business value is kind of becoming a bridge solution. So really, a lot of these intelligent automation solutions can be stood up pretty quickly, and there's a lot of low-code solutions where a traditional IT implementation may take a lot longer. So you can see why automation initiatives are really taking off across organizations. So when people ask me what I do, if they're under 12 or if it's my grandmother, I just like to oversimplify and tell them I build robots. That's just like the simple, easy answer. So, but as I'm sure most of you have picked up, these aren't actual robots, they're software robots. So my grandmother would be very disappointed if she found that out. But because these are software robots, there's different ways we can utilize these automations depending on the business's needs and goals. So the kind of two typical ways that you'll see are attended versus unattended. So attended bot would be kind of like, think of that like an Excel macro where it's running locally on your machine. You can go up, hit run as needed. And it's on a business user's laptop or local, versus unattended could be running on a dedicated server or VM. And these could be scheduled at a specific time and kicked off. So there's you can see here, there's a lot of different ways that these bots can be run. So there's hybrid models of these. There's a lot of different hybrids. And so one of which would be maybe kind of like the traditional hybrid model where a human would enter specific input for an automation. So an automation could be waiting for a human to have some data, and they could kind of work in parallel to achieve that and really come up with a robust solution. So ultimately, the differences and the flexibility and how we can run these bots and how they can be deployed really offers nuanced solutions for the business. And with that, I will turn it over to Jessa, who will dive into intelligent document processing.
Thanks, Dustin. So on the next few slides, we're going to talk through intelligent document processing, beginning with some challenges faced with manual document processing, defining intelligent document processing, the types and attributes of documents, and then Chris is going to wrap it up with the value and efficiencies of utilizing intelligent document processing and some use cases. So just to kind of start, I wanted to go through some challenges you've likely experienced due to manual document processing. Like the name says, manual document processing is manually going through documents and performing actions on them. So for example, you have a human that handles invoices and they're manually typing it into an accounts payable or other sort of application system. Many companies that have paper-intensive processes spend money and time both in human resources and printing, going through documents one by one. Manual document processing is prone to human error due to the manual movement or copy and paste of data. So whether transposing it incorrectly, they put the decimal point in a wrong place for the invoice, copying the wrong data, or pasting it in the wrong place. This leads to rework and could cost money if there are any implications on the data that is entered, such as meeting a KPI or charging someone money. So with my invoice example, it's a matter of $100 versus $10,000 if you put the decimal point in the wrong place. Decision-making or process flow can also be based on the type of document that's being processed. If it's greater than 100, go this way. If it's less than 100, go this way. And if done manually, decision-making could end up being very subjective based on who's reviewing it, or the wrong process flow could be followed, again, causing cost and time implications. Humans also take breaks. They typically work an 8-hour workday. The volume of documents reviewed, 1, costs money, and 2, may not be done quickly or efficiently enough based on the employee doing the job. They only work 8 hours a day, so you have 8 hours to review documents. And kind of on the flip side, if they work 8 hours a day and have 10 documents to review, they might take that 8 hours to review those documents. And just to give some more supporting evidence to the challenges of manual document processing, 50% of time and resources wasted on paper processes are attributed to the time spent on rework and searching for documents. Other things time and resources are wasted on are the cost of printing, the cost of paying people to do the printing, and lack of visibility into the status of the workflow since it's a manual process. With manual processes, following a document through a workflow is very hard to track. With automation tools like robotics process automation or RPA, you can solve a lot of these challenges. Things are done consistently the same way every time, decisions are made the same way and are no longer subjective, and you can see where a document is in the workflow at any given time. With a lot of these tools, they have audit tracking, so you can see where it is in the workflow, if there's any exceptions or errors, and even see the successes as well. And most importantly, you're saving time, money, and resources, both from a process and a rework perspective when you utilize an automation robot to transpose the data, and also greatly reduces the risk of error. So let's take it a step further. Intelligent document processing is a smarter way of processing your documents and taking away the manual workload from a human, which allows them to focus on more value-added tasks. Intelligent document processing utilizes optical character recognition, or OCR, to look at a document and based on a specific location defined by the user, can identify and extract that data. However, even going one more step, you can incorporate artificial intelligence, or AI, and AI utilizes machine learning models and natural language processing to be able to extract data from unstructured documents, images, and even handwriting. With machine learning models, you're training the automation on what you're looking for and where to look. You're looking for context clues. With every document reviewed, the model gets smarter and smarter. And you'll see in our demo later an example of kind of what the training entails with one of the tools. Documents are broken down into 3 main different types. So you have structured documents. Those are documents that are the same every time. You utilize rule-based processing to identify exactly where a field is and the data that should be extracted from it. For example, a W-4, it's the same every time. It doesn't change. If you look at it in the name field, the text for the name will be right next to it. If you look at date of birth, the digits and the date format will be right next to it as well. It's the same way. So structured documents are straightforward to set up, and they don't require any recurring training because, like I said, they're the same every time. With unstructured documents, they have no fixed format, like a contract, for example. These documents need to use a model-based approach or a machine learning model for processing. Documents that are unstructured have the information you need, but it's located in different areas and in different ways throughout the document. So the model-based approach utilizes training to learn where and how to look for the needed information, like I said with the context clues. The model needs to essentially read the text to extract the meaning and identify the required information. Other examples of unstructured documents are emails, drug prescriptions, anything that can vary in nature and placement on a document. So for example, with an email, you might need to scan an email to look for key terms to know if it goes down workflow A or B. Well, so all emails vary depending who it's coming from, but regardless, you need to scan it for some context clues to determine which workflow it goes into. And then you have a hybrid of both structured and unstructured documents. These semi-structured documents utilize both fixed formats and variable parts. These also need to utilize a model-based approach in processing because certain information can vary. With semi-structured documents, fields are usually located in the same place every time, but the information and the size of the information could vary. A good example of this, one every organization sees, and one you'll see in the demo, is with invoices. While invoices are typically set up the same and the same data is extracted, the amount, who it's billed to, the address, the invoice number, the date, all that stuff, there are pieces that could vary from invoice to invoice. So like a table, it could be that there's a variance in the number of items listed in the invoice if they set it up with, a row for each item, or it can vary in the columns in its table. Some might just say description and amount, some might say quantity and description and amount, so it can vary depending on the invoice. So a model-based approach learns how to identify what fields need to be extracted because it's an invoice document type, and then it performs the extraction based on what fields actually exist in the invoice. Other examples of semi-structured documents are receipts, utility bills, medical bills, all things that are set up the same typically, but based on kind of the information in the invoice can vary. Intelligent process documents are flexible, intelligent, accurate, and efficient. So they're flexible in the sense you can use a combination of different approaches depending on what type of document you're looking at. The use of artificial intelligence also is flexible to identify the location of the data you need to extract. It's intelligent because automation robots learn the more they go through a document, and it's also intelligent enough to filter out any noise you might see in documents. So things such as documents that are unrelated to what you're trying to extract from, you're going through contract after contract and then a job application pops in. It's intelligent enough to filter out that job application and continue on. And also, a document's rotated, it's intelligent enough to identify that. Again, you'll see in the demo a tool that helps train and validate the documents as well. It's accurate, again, with the training, the more you work with these models, the smarter and more accurate they become. The benefit of automation is its accuracy and that you're reducing the risk of error by a human, which in turn greatly reduces the risk of rework. Employees are able to spend less time on rework, more time on value-added activity, and it helps mitigate risks. With human error, you're risking an error that could have a large financial impact, like I mentioned with the decimal point error. Having automation do it greatly reduces that risk. And finally, efficient. Automation robots, they don't take breaks, they don't take PTO, and they can work 24/7 if capacity allows. So this means that you can process a high volume of documents as well as different types of documents, getting processed and done more quickly and efficiently. This efficiency allows human resource costs to be allocated somewhere else than to manual document processing.
So thank you, Jess. I appreciate you going through that. Couple of things that Jess hit on too around, the error-prone, kind of dual entry or repetitive entry. That's one of the big things, that we look at as far as, risk mitigation. As these documents are being entered, re-entered, one of the key things is to make sure that you're eliminating that error. Now, these tools are not, it's not magic. As Jessica said, you do have to train these just like you train a new employee. But really it's how accurate can we get the models, and how much can we take off of those humans and really elevate them to do more important work, more cognitive work as they go through, whatever process they're looking at. We'll talk about some examples on the next slide. But our end all goal here is to improve customer experience, improve employee experience, and then, really get more efficient as we go through the different processes, the different business processes through, those business functions. So you look at the employee experience, for example. So how much of that, those mundane tasks can we take off of them? We want to, employee experience has become bigger and bigger over the last, few years. As the labor market has gotten tighter and tighter, skilled resources are hard to come by, and That's really, what we're trying to do is make sure that we retain those folks. The turnover is expensive, so how do we keep them interested in their job, keep them focused on those high value tasks, really use their cognitive skills to improve the business. Customer experience, same thing. The faster we can turn around, whatever, if it's a request, if it's an invoice, if it's a document that needs to be processed, something for benefits, that type of thing. How much faster can we do that? These robots and the intelligent document processing pieces will run 24 hours a day, so you can process a lot of that in the background, kick the exceptions to a human, and have them process that piece. And then what do? We have a lot of clients that have to deal with flexible, seasonal work and so forth. And so how do you deal with that influx? Does customer experience suffer because it's longer, wait time to process that? Do employees get more stressed because they're having more, this massive influx of work? So we can kind of normalize that with using some of the technologies to automate those processes. So handle you need to add another robot or some temporary workload, pieces. Then we do that through some of these efficiencies. So, reading these documents, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through here. As Jessica said, you'll see a couple of demos here in just a minute. But let's talk about some specific use cases. So there are literally thousands of use cases that we look at as far as where this technology can be used. So kind of keep your eyes, ears open as far as what's going on in your specific industry or your specific enterprise. We're going to hit on a couple today. Justin mentioned invoice and receipt, so we'll hit those as far as the actual demos go. But really, in every different kind of genre of industry, there's an opportunity for use. So healthcare, for medical forms, medical billing, the multiple systems that healthcare companies have to use to enter data, whether that's insurance, whether it's the different doctor groups that have to bring information in, whether that's from a handwritten form. How many of us have gone to the doctor? You've been referred to a specialist from your primary doctor. You go for your annual checkup. It's like, here's some more paper forms to fill out. So what do they do with those forms? They stick them in a folder. Well, typically they're going to transcribe at least some of that information, put it into your medical record, and then then file it away. But why do you have to do that 5 or 6 times? And if you do have to do it, how much administrative overhead is there in that kind of thing happen? So those are just some things on the medical side that you can look at. From the public sector side, applications, benefits claims. We do deal with a fair bit of state and local government where there's multiple forms. Those forms may be online. Those forms may be that a customer or a client or a beneficiary can fill those out and then send them in. So how do you ingest all those documents, and how do you make sure that you've got a high set of accuracy? Jessica kind of talked about the different document types and what ways to look at that data. And that's something that's maybe we're not capturing all the data as well. So human resources, employee onboarding, lots of paperwork that goes along with that. And then obviously from a financial services perspective, loan applications. A lot of these things are digitized today, but maybe not necessarily automated. And so when you look at the loan applications, maybe you're getting some key information off of that, but are you collecting all the documents? Do you know that you're collecting all the documents? And that's where kind of the combination of the intelligent document processing piece, as well as the robots, building workflows, building those automations, kind of come together and deliver a complete solution. So again, we'll touch on a couple of these, the invoice and the receipt here in just a minute. And I'll give you a couple more examples that are very specific here. So, and specific to Abby, there's global auto manufacturer, and these are public references that I'd be happy to share with you. Really reduce the amount of time of ingestion of those invoices and accounts payable. Now, again, the intelligent document processing piece is going to capture that data and potentially make that a good fit for an overall process automation where you're actually going to enter that into an ERP system. But the capture piece, just reading those documents, looking at the invoices, saved a person and a half, just the time, so they can reallocate that staff. And one thing that I always caution folks on is, 95% accuracy is incredible. We don't always expect 95% accuracy. Never expect 100. We'll get close, as Jessica said, as you train those machine learning models. As it gets better, as the machine learning becomes more intelligent, understands the documents that you're processing and so forth, you're going to get better accuracy, but don't expect 100%. On the UiPath example, really on the healthcare side, this was a case study that was around low birth weight issues with pregnant women. And so looking at the overall, issues with low birth weight, are they capturing all the data that's on that paper record? Are they just entering, what's missing? How are they making better decisions and recommending better treatment plans for these high-risk folks? So identify the high-risk, mothers, identify what the treatment plan should be for those, and then, recommend that. So there's obviously cost savings in doing that, but the great thing about that one is just the low birth weight pregnancies were reduced significantly. So catch that early, better patient experience, better mother-child experience, and then overall just a better treatment plan. So capturing more data, using that data to make better outcomes. So with that, don't forget to submit any of your questions, and we'll address those here at the end. But Jessica, go ahead and let's kick off the demos here with the expense entry demo.
All right, so the demos. So just to give you some background, we're utilizing UiPath for these that Chris has named a few times. They're one of the larger and more prominent players in the intelligent automation space. With these demos, we're utilizing their document understanding tool. So it goes through the phases of digitization of the document, classification, extraction, and exporting the data from each document into the system that you need it to be in. You start out kind of setting up the different document types and the fields you want to extract for each document type. You then go into the classification to identify the key terms on how to recognize a specific document type, such as an invoice or a receipt. And then in the extraction portion is where you identify exactly what fields and information you want from your document. So for the first demo, it's going to be an expense entry. We're going to log into using a recording tool. We're going to be logging into the Salesforce Kimball application that we're using. So we're using a recording tool, which helps import it into UiPath's workflow. So it's opening Google Chrome, logging in as me as I would any other day. And you're going to see it search for the expense claims module just to be a more consistent way instead of clicking a button. So it's going to search for that and start a new claim. So this new claim is going to be named based on a naming convention identified, which is expense report and the date that this was run, which was 4/21, and a non-client expense. So now it's digitizing the receipt in the background, like I mentioned, from the PDF that I uploaded. So in a second, you'll see the validation station come up. And that's really for the business user to help validate and train the model. So you will see that pull up in just a second. And I'll cover it in a second, but take note on the left side, there's different percentages. Those are the confidence levels, and I'll explain those in a second. But you can see it extracted the date, the name of the vendor, and the amount. It identified the expense type as a food and a meal. So you go ahead and save that once you confirm everything, and it's going to create the expense report. But with those confidence levels, you can set up things where if it's greater than 80% confident, you don't even need to go through and validate the information. You trust that it knows what it's doing. Whereas if it's less than 80%, it needs to show you that. So now you see it's updating the incurred date for the date of the receipt, which was April 20th, 2021. So it's making that change. And now it's going to hit that little add expense button and do thing. So update that incurred date. It's a miscellaneous travel expense. It's adding the amount of the invoice or the receipt. And then the notes, I have it adding the vendor name. So Wawa, whatever store number it is. It's now submitting the expense. And so however long that took is how long it takes to really do one, less if you don't need to go through the validation. So now that it's submitted, we're going to open up Microsoft Excel. It's important to note you can put this in any application software ERP tool, but just for the sake of this, and you can just see here the data that was extracted, the same thing you saw in Validation Station. So that's the expense entry one. The next demo is going to be invoice processing. So we're going to go through 2 invoices, extract the data. You'll see an example of kind of the training and the validating that you can do with it. And it's going to put it into Excel. Again, any application it can go into, but for the sake of this, it's going to go into an Excel document. So right off the back, it's going to pull up the first invoice in Validation Station. You'll notice kind of the blue shaded areas, that's where it's helping identify the key terms to identify it as an invoice. It pulls the invoice date, the invoice number, you have the name and the address. If you notice on the address, there's a space between the T and the R in street. So this is part of the training of the machine learning model for the invoice. So all you really have to do is delete that space, or you would edit it to whatever it needs to be. And it makes that update, and you'll see it reflected in that address line. So once you save and confirm this, this then goes into the training of the model to get smarter and smarter. So again, you have all the information, and with every validation station, if there's a table, you need to validate that table information. So you can see here, there's 5 different columns you can choose from. We're only pulling 4: quantity, name. Again, you can see there's an error in the space between A and S, so you just take that out. Unit price and line total. And once you save it, you're confirming, hey, the data's right. The totals match as extracted, and you go ahead and save it. So that's where the training again comes into play. And now you'll see the next invoice pull up. Same thing, invoice document type. It's pulling the invoice number, the name, the address. You notice this time there's no issue with the address, so you don't need to make any changes. And then again, you need to go into the table. You can see with this table, there's only 2 columns, as the other one had 4. So this is kind of what I'm talking about with the machine learning model. It still has a space for the 4 columns, but it's only needing to extract data from 2. So there's no errors, it's just not pulling the data. So once you go through and confirm everything, again, you save and close. You're confirming the total, and now the 2 receipts have been exported. So like I said, we're putting this in Excel. Once it pulls up, you can see it has all the data we extracted minus the details in the table, which you'll see. You can see the street, the space was fixed. And then I did a formula, just do the sum of column F so you can see the invoice total. Then I have a tab for each invoice that shows the breakdown of what's in the table. So that one just has the 2 columns that were pulled. And the other one has the information from the 4 columns that were pulled. So this is just an example to show you kind of the power of document understanding with invoices. And the next step could be to put it into an accounts payable system. You don't even need an Excel spreadsheet. You can just put it in there. But just some examples to show you. And now with that, those were the demos, and I'm going to pass it over to Chris to kind of wrap it up.
Hey, Jessica, thanks. Great demos. Certainly appreciate you taking us through those. As you probably saw, these are fairly simple examples, but highly repetitive. And that's one of the key things that we look at is, from a process perspective, is it set? Dustin kind of hit on these, key things for RPA. Is it a set process, set rules, highly repetitive? And can we automate those things? Really think of these processes as where you may have APIs, integrations, that you use for typical, software integrations. Think of it as kind of sitting on top, right? Anything that a human would do, reading that invoice, typing that in there, looking at those expense receipts and typing that in there. We all love expense reports. It's my favorite thing to do. But, how do we, make these things a little bit easier on our folks? So if you kind of think about, from the document types and the number of documents that you get from any point within your business, maybe that's hundreds of documents a day, maybe it's thousands of documents a day, maybe it's hundreds of thousands of documents a day. how do you, do you have teams just, maniacally going through those things and retyping or processing those? It's just another way to do things more efficiently. And like we said earlier, really utilize, folks in the best light. So, the other key part that Jessa hit on as she went through the document types is, that unstructured data. Is there data that you're not capturing today that could be useful in ingesting that data and using that data to make better business decisions, making driving better outcomes for, if you're kind of down this data-driven decisioning path, which a lot of companies are doing because there is so much data out there, but how do you harness that? And our data group really, kind of helps with that as well. But like I said, nothing's ever 100%. The more that you can train these models, the more consistent, invoice types are, receipt types are, the document forms are, the better accuracy that we can get. So again, appreciate your time. We're going to turn it over to Jennifer. She's going to moderate our questions, our Q&A for this morning. And Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chris. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the Q&A portion. We did get a handful of questions, so we want to run through those. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to submit them and we can follow up after. So our first question is, how long is the development lifecycle for a typical intelligent automation implementation? Dustin, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of factors that kind of determine this, and a lot of things you have to consider when you're looking at your life cycle. So things like how well documented your process is, or how complex it is, or even what tool you're going to use. But as kind of a simplified answer, I think most life cycles I've seen is usually between 2 to 8 weeks. And again, that depends on a lot of things. There's methodology. There's a lot of factors that would really determine the exact timeline, but I would say a range 2 to 8 weeks.
Okay, thank you. And then our second question is, how does intelligent document processing know what type of document I'm looking at? Jessica, can you answer this one for us?
Yeah, of course. So it depends on the type of document you're working with. In the case of structured documents, when you're going through the initial setup, you can identify the key terms on the document, to help identify it that way. So for example, with the W-4, the key terms could be W-4, withholding, exemption, allowance certificate. So the combination of those will help identify, as a W-4 document type. And then when you have things like semi-structured and unstructured documents, at least in the case of UiPath's document understanding, in the initial setup, you upload documents of that type, and then the system processes and extracts key terms on its own of how you could identify it that way. And then as you start the training, as you go through adding more documents and running through it, it's going to validate those existing terms, or it's going to identify new ones. If it thinks it's a W-4 and you say, oh no, actually it's an invoice, it's going to recognize that, and the training will say, okay, well then maybe these are the terms we need to look for. And like I said, it continues to get more accurate on identifying the document types as you go along.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jessa.
Yeah, one thing that's key, Jessa, to just to add on to that is one of the things that that we do see is, we talked about, Abby and UiPath and, all these different components and so forth. There's a lot of integrations that can be done, so you can pick the, kind of the right tool for the right job. UiPath's got some great machine learning models. If you've got your own machine learning model, you can bring that too, and we can incorporate that. So they're very flexible platforms, which, to Jessa's point, you're kind of training those. But if you like I said, if you've got your own machine learning model that you want to bring to the table and incorporate that in, certainly able to do that as well.
Great, thank you. And then our next question is going to be for you, Chris, actually. So it says, you mentioned in one of the examples of a use case being employee onboarding. What kind of automations or document processing would that involve?
So I can't speak this from my personal experience, but I probably talk from my daughter's personal experience recently. But a lot of the documents as you apply or start a new job. So you've got, Jessica mentioned W-4s, you've got I-9s, you've got many different pieces of documentation that you fill out. Either it's an electronic document, or it could be that PDF that you print out and write in, scan it back in, and then email it to somebody. So kind of a little bit of an archaic process, but or you might even fax it to somebody. But that's just the kind of the state we're in today. Not everything's digitized. So, but how do you take that information and then enter it in different systems? Some folks have fully integrated systems, maybe a Workday, or where they've got their learning management system. They've got or Oracle's HR system, or Payable, whatever that system is. But when you start looking at the individual components, okay, now I've got to enter that person's information in my payroll system. I've got to enter it into the HR system. I've got to enter it into my learning management system. How do I, get all that done? And it's typically somebody typing it. So using, the robotic process automation, intelligent document understanding to pull all the data out of the document and then enter it into those systems. My daughter just went through, the full onboarding process for one of our local schools. And basically she had a stack of paper probably this high that that she had to fill out, and she's like, Dad, why am I putting all this in paper? I said, well, someone will eventually enter it into a system and you'll get a paycheck at some point. So but kind of real world examples, it's just there's a lot of systems out there that are not heavily integrated still today. You all may have a bunch of those, and this is that technology that can kind of put all that together. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So we have two more questions. The next one is, who typically owns and manages these intelligent automation tools within a given organization? Dustin, can you answer that for us?
Yeah, sure. So typically a center of excellence, or COE, will be set up within a shared services branch or an IT branch. So the COE will really ideally become kind of the in-house automation experts. Now, where that COE sits is flexible. But again, I've typically seen the center of excellence be part of an IT or some sort of shared services department.
Okay, thank you. And then our last question, is there any data that compares the 95% accuracy of your RPA versus the average accuracy of humans? Chris?
Yeah, and that was a very specific use case. I'll actually have to go back and take a look. We can take that as kind of a follow-up and see if there was any kind of pre versus post automation. It does vary by automation and by the document type and so forth. One of the things kind of Jessica showed you the validation station that's in UI, which is a great tool. A lot of people, not only do you train through that, but you also validate. So I'm not comfortable, how well this is doing. I'm going to set that threshold at 95%. If it's less than 95% accurate, perceived accuracy, then I want to validate it. Well, then most people typically start lowering that down. Once we get to the 80% range, it's really pretty good around 80% accuracy. So somewhere in that ballpark. Again, it really highly depends on the document type, handwritten versus type, that type of thing. But I will follow up on that question and get that answer out and see if we've got any specific metrics for that one case study.
Great, thank you, Chris. So that's going to wrap up our Q&A for today.